It started with a crisp white envelope, the kind that carried bad news dressed in polite fonts. I had just returned from a week away at my sister's place, and the first thing I noticed was the envelope wedged halfway under my front door, bearing the unmistakable logo of the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association and organization. I'd mostly associated with overly enthusiastic Christmas decoration contests and passive-aggressive emails about garbage bins. I tore it open in my kitchen, still balancing my grocery bags. And there it was. Notice of violation, total penalty, $350,000. My eyes darted across the accusations: unauthorized structures, encroachments on common property, failure to maintain, landscaping in designated zones. The list read like I'd spent the last 5 years running an underground construction syndicate. I didn't even own the alleged structures. In fact, those structures were the neat row of HOA-approved townhouses that bordered the back of my 5-acre property. My land bought 15 years ago was mostly wild and wooded, except for my modest single-story home and a weathered red barn. Confusion turned into indignation. I called the HOA office immediately, only to be greeted by a chipper receptionist. Who said the president, Greg Hensley, would happily explain everything if I attended the next board meeting. Happily. This man was accusing me of violations that could bankrupt me, and he was happy about it. That Friday, I walked into the community clubhouse to find a half-dozen board members seated behind folding tables like judges at some suburban tribunal. Greg, a tall, smug-faced man with the build of someone who played high school football and never moved on, launched into a speech about how satellite surveys showed I had encroached into HOA common land. I almost laughed. It was the HOAs. Houses that sat on what I knew to be my property. I pulled out my original deed, complete with hand-drawn boundary maps signed by the county surveyor, and slid it across the table. Greg glanced at it for all of 3 seconds before saying, "Our maps are more current." More current? My land hadn't moved? My grandfather always said, when people start ignoring paper trails, they're usually hiding something. So that night, I dug through my filing cabinets until I found everything: purchase agreements, the county's parcel map, even old black and white aerial photos from before the subdivision existed. The evidence was damning, but I needed undeniable proof. That's when I called my friend Sam, a surveyor with the kind of obsessive precision that made him measure his own backyard 3 times just in case. The next morning, Sam and I trudged through my property, planting stakes along the original boundaries. Sure enough, the HOA's newest homes, those pristine beige boxes with artificial turf, weren't just brushing the edge of my property. They were sitting smack in the middle of it, like someone had stolen my living room furniture and was now charging me rent to sit in it. When Sam looked up from his clipboard and muttered, "They're in deep trouble," I realized the $350,000 fine wasn't the real story. The real story was that the HOAS empire was literally built on stolen ground, and I was about to dig deeper than they ever wanted me to. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, I was armed like a man heading into battle, only instead of armor I had a binder so thick it could be used as a doorstop. It's filled with surveys, deeds, aerial photographs, and letters from the county assessor's office. Greg and his board looked almost bored when I walked in, as if expecting me to grovel for mercy and set up a payment plan for their absurd fine. Instead, I started with a simple statement: "I believe your homes are on my property." I got their attention. The murmurs began as I laid out Sam's certified survey report, which clearly showed the property lines slicing straight through the living rooms of 4 of their prime units and taking a generous bite out of 3 others. Greg tried to wave it off as a simple mapping error, but I could see the nervous tapping of his pen against the table. Then I handed them the letter from the county attorney, confirming that my property's boundaries hadn't changed in decades and that any structures built on it without my permission constituted trespassing. A woman named Linda began whispering to the treasurer, her eyes darting toward me like I was holding a detonator. Greg attempted to regain control, announcing they would review the matter internally, but I wasn't done. I slid a final document across the tabula, formal notice of encroachment, prepared by my lawyer, giving the HOA 30 days to either remove their houses from my land or negotiate a purchase at market value plus damages. Oh, and by the way, I added, failure to act means I'll be charging rent, active rent for every month you've been using my land. The silence in that room could have swallowed the entire clubhouse. In the days that followed, the HOA's confidence crumbled faster than a stale cookie. Neighbors began approaching me in hushed tones, asking if it was true, if their homes really sat on the wrong land. Some were angry at me, others angry at Greg for hiding the truth. Word spread beyond Meadowbrook, and soon a local reporter knocked on my door, eager to hear how a small-town homeowner had turned a $350,000 fine into a potential multi-million-dollar payout. Greg's smugness evaporated once the county issued an injunction freezing all HOA operations until the matter was resolved. It turned out the development's original builder had made a surveying error years ago, and the HOA had been operating under faulty maps ever since maps Greg knew were disputed, but had chosen to ignore because it would be too expensive to fix. Expensive for them, maybe profitable for me. Negotiations began with the HOA offering to forgive the fine and pay me a token sum, which I declined with a smile. Eventually, their lawyer, looking as though he hadn't slept in a week, came back with a real offer. They'd buy the land under those homes at full appraised value, plus a settlement for damages and legal costs. The figure was high enough to make my head spin, and higher still when my lawyer reminded me about the potential back rent. By the time the ink dried, I had more than enough to retire early, fix up my barn, maybe take that long road trip I'd been putting off for years. As for Greg, he resigned from the board to focus on personal matters, which was probably HOA speak for escape the pitchforks. The best part? The next time I walked past those rows of beige houses, I didn't see trespassers anymore. I saw a reminder that sometimes, when the world tries to bury you under fines and threats, the truth can dig you out and build you a fortune on the very ground they tried to take.